Okay, so Sir Keir Starmer facing a major rebellion over the Israel-Gaza war. 8 Labour shadow ministers quitting their roles to vote for an immediate ceasefire.
Jess Phillips, probably the most prominent of those to face a sacking. Afzal Khan and Yasmin Qureshi also among shadow frontbenchers who lost their roles by backing the motion from the SNP.
Just adding all of that up, in total 56 Labour MPs defied their leader as pro-Palestinian demonstrators gathered outside Westminster chanting for this elusive ceasefire.
Well, let's speak now to the Shadow Secretary of State for Defence, John Healey, who joins us this morning. You clearly voted with the three-line whip with your leader. Good morning, Sir Keir Starmer. What was it that managed to, persuade you to go down that road as opposed to your colleagues?
Well, I totally understand why our backbenchers want to respond to calls from their constituencies about a ceasefire. But in the end, we're not a protest party. We're doing and saying what we would do in government. That means we're backing Israel's right to defend itself after the huge Hamas terror attack, but saying, of course, this is not a blank cheque and they must do more to meet their duties under international law. And then we're also adding our modest weight as an opposition party to the work with others to try and secure a break in the fighting, because that's the most practical way now of being able to get more aid into Gaza, to get more hostages out and perhaps build the confidence that we can see more further diplomacy in the future.
John, it's interesting you talk about a break in the fighting. Is there really much of a difference when push comes to shove between a ceasefire and a pause in hostilities?
I think there is. A pause is one-sided, in this case Israel, stopping fighting, and we've managed to, working with others, to get them to agree regular, small, short pauses, which should be a basis for much longer pauses to get more aid in and hostages out. A ceasefire, of course, requires both sides to agree to stop fighting, and Hamas have made it clear that the huge terror attacks on October the 7th were the first time, and they'll do it again and again. And a call for a ceasefire now really is a demand for Israel to give up its right to defend itself, while Hamas still has the fighters, the missile systems, the command centres to be able to strike again.
John Healey, you said a moment ago you completely understood and respected why your colleagues on the backbenches felt that they had to represent their constituents' views. But we're not just talking about backbenchers in this rebellion, are we? We're talking about 8 shadow frontbenchers, and those include people like Jess Phillips, probably the most prominent of them all. And this goes to show that this is an issue that cuts much deeper than kind of the left wing of your party, doesn't it? This is a crisis for Sir Keir Starmer's authority.
I know we lost a small number of front benches. I hate losing people from the front bench. I know all of them, including Jess Phillips, wrestled with that very difficult decision. All of them have said they want to see Keir Starmer in Downing Street and will work with us to secure a Labour government. But we are acting as if we are a government, not a protest party. And when it comes to votes in Parliament, that requires a firmness and a discipline, just like being in government will in the future.
John, what about stopping the boats, turning this spotlight now on the Conservatives, and the Prime Minister is saying he will do whatever it takes? People getting in touch with us today, they want to know what Labour would do.
Well, it is his flagship scheme. It's failed completely, and we've been saying for some time, look, this is unworkable, and now we know it's unlawful. Instead of chasing headlines, adopt the plan that we've been proposing. That means, for a start, working with other European unions to get a returns agreement in place, better intelligence, and above all, fresh legislation that gives the National Crime Agency stronger powers and the ability to set up a joint unit with other forces on the European continent that could go after these smuggling gangs.
It's interesting because I seem to remember the National Crime Agency coming out and saying that efforts to stop migrants crossing the Channel will actually struggle without schemes like Rwanda.
Well, there's no indication at all that £140 million and this proposal for the scheme to Rwanda has had any deterrent effect at all. The discussions that Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper have had with Interpol about the way that our national forces can work more closely together gives us the belief that setting up a joint unit, stronger powers would allow them to go after the smuggling gangs, would be able to clamp down on what they're doing, and at the same time we would appoint more case officers and more returns officers so that we get rid of the 165,000 backlog that has built up under the Tories, which of course is costing us all £8 million a day.
Well, a lot of people would say it's been built up under various immigration lawyers and a sort of merry-go-round of, appeals about various things. Rishi Sunak saying he would implement new legislation designed to prevent that happening. What do you think about that?
Well, of course, we didn't have a small boats problem like this just 4 years ago, and I mean, extraordinary at the weekend on Sunday, more than 600 crossed the channel. What the judgment yesterday from the Supreme Court made clear, however, is that it isn't just a question of the European Convention on Human Rights. It's a web of international law which binds us to international rules. And at a time when it's more important than ever to be arguing for countries to observe basic human rights, abide by international law, it would be a very, very damaging step for Britain to try and step away from those long-established obligations.
OK, John Healey, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. John is the Shadow Secretary of State for Defence.
Thank you both.